Going back in time a couple years, 2017's Ghost in the Shell really seemed like a film that was destined for greatness. It had a super popular female lead actor who had proven herself as a bankable action star deserving of her own franchise. It had a highly striking aesthetic setting that would allow for incredible visuals. It had relatively well-known source material with an already established fanbase. Quite honestly, even based on the promotional material, this was a project that you would happily bet all your life savings on. Like, this film would inevitably become a hit. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Last time we discussed the topic of forgettable filmmaking, and in many ways Ghost in the Shell falls under the same topic, only in a much worse way. Because whereas previously we talked about how the audience might forget some aspects of a film over time, this is a film that you are pretty much guaranteed to forget entirely the moment you turn it off. Because the problem that 2017's Ghost in the Shell suffers from is perhaps the single most destructive problem any movie can suffer from: the problem of invisibility. In essence, what I mean with invisibility is the age-old visual filmmaking mantra I've pretty much shouted at you before. Showing instead of telling, establishing vital narrative information visually, setting up stuff before paying it off. As I said, I've touched on this problem of non-visual filmmaking in multiple videos in the past, but never really as its own comprehensive entity. And what better way to do so than here, with a film that was pretty much single-handedly destroyed by it. I'm not saying non-visual storytelling is the only issue that Ghost in the Shell has, but it is without a doubt the biggest and the most notable issue, the effects of which you can, for example, begin to see right at the start. Like, we have this highly visual driven, highly aesthetically potent world, and just guess what the movie chooses as its opening image, aka arguably the most important image of any movie. No, really, take a guess. After the opening credits, what is the very first thing we see? All that said, let's just get it over with. Let's check out 2017's Ghost in the Shell to see what exactly happens when you blunder visual storytelling. Let's see how you can make your movie become a massive, forgettable critical and box office failure by keeping the most crucial narrative aspects of it invisible. The first issue of Ghost in the Shell is the blunt fact that this is one of the most emotionless movies ever made. And the easy explanation for this would be to just say that, well, it's because we have this mostly unemotional cyborg as the lead. But I don't really think that's a valid claim, because honestly, Scarlett Johansson does do a pretty great job as Major, and she's proven that she can evoke a lot of emotion even in movies where she's just a formless AI with nothing but a voice. The best way for me to explain the real cause behind the issue is to just explain the most emotion-heavy aspect of the film, the subplot of Major finding out the truth of her past. In a nutshell, before Major became a cybernetic warrior, she was just an ordinary girl/woman whose parents died in a terrorist attack. She doesn't remember much of her past clearly, but she does remember smaller details, like the fact that her parents loved her very much. But then at the midpoint, we have this shocking, very emotion-heavy reveal where she finds out the hard truth.
The harbor. My parents. The way they died.
We gave you false memories. Carter wanted to motivate you to fight terrorists.
Nothing I have is real.
In of itself, this moment should work. The shots work. The acting works. Again, Scarlett Johansson does do a great job. And yet, there's no emotion in the moment whatsoever, because there's one teeny tiny problem with it. The fact that this moment depends entirely on emotional investment that the audience was never given a chance to make. In the hour of runtime before this reveal, we've never actually seen anything about Major's past life with her family. Not who they were, not what they looked like, not what they were like as a family, nothing. And so, how can the audience possibly feel Major's feeling of losing something when they never had it in the first place? Like, the reason the audience even knows that Major had a family is because in a couple scenes it's briefly mentioned.
You were on a boat, a refugee boat. It was sunk by terrorists.
Your past.
I don't remember much. Just fragments, bits and pieces.
My parents, they died bringing us to this country. Our boat sank in the harbor.
Imagine this reveal but with proper visual setup. Imagine if instead of opening the movie with a bunch of text, you open it with short flashes and moments of Major in her past life where she spends time with her mom and dad. Imagine if Major always carries a photo of her family with her that she takes comfort in remembering. The memories don't have to be full individual scenes, but just quick visual puzzle pieces that form a full picture throughout the first half of the film. And then, after all that time spent on establishing Major's beautiful past, aka her one and only source of joy and comfort in this cold world, we find out that all of it is nothing but a lie. Now it hurts. Now you feel it. Same with the ending. Eventually, it turns out that before being a white sex icon, Major was actually a little Asian girl that was taken from her mother. And at the end, the two are finally reunited. But once again, there's no emotion to this moment whatsoever. Why? Because we've never actually seen the little Asian girl. No photos of her, no family videos of her, no clear visual perception of who she is or what she looks like. And if the audience doesn't have a visual perception of her, she doesn't appear real.
And if you think that catching one blurry glimpse of the girl is enough, fine, but it still doesn't help because we never see her in connection to her mother, and so a clear love relationship between them is never sufficiently established.
And if something doesn't appear real, it's pretty much impossible for the audience to create an emotional connection with it.
Calm down.
How many were there before me?
98 unsuccessful attempts before you.
In addition to just the emotion-heavy stuff, another effective way for a narrative to leave a lasting impression on the audience as a whole is by making sure that the time they invest ultimately pays off. If you wonder why Breaking Bad is considered one of the greatest TV shows ever, this is one of the biggest reasons. Because simply put, there is nothing more powerful and satisfying than a great payoff. And to be fair to Ghost in the Shell, there are payoffs in here, a big bunch actually, and some of them are pretty damn good. Unfortunately, what this movie seems to forget is that for every payoff, you first need a proper setup that puts it in context. And pretty much for every payoff resolution here, bigger or smaller, there is none. For example, the ending battle. On a quick look, this ending battle does seem like a great final. The theme works. We have a part human, part robot soldier going up against a fully robotic destroyer to decide which one truly is better. And the stakes work just the same. The Spider-Bot does seem like an intimidating opponent. That is, until you realize that, wait a second, we've never seen it before. We've never even heard about it before. Nothing about this battle has ever been set up. And consequently, we have no context for any of it. Why should we worry about an opponent if we have no previous experience with that opponent to give us a reason to worry? How can this battle ever be powerful if we don't actually know the stakes? Why is the ending battle in Mission Impossible Fallout so effective? Because August Walker has always throughout the story been built up as a physical superior to Ethan Hunt. And so imagine if this movie did the same with the Spider-Bot and established it as being the new superior version of Major. Let's say that at an earlier point in the movie, Major and her team are having trouble with some bad guys, and then the Spider-Bot just walks in and demolishes every last bad guy without any trouble. This way, we get an understanding of how deadly the Spider-Bot is. This way, the theme would make sense. This way, the ending battle would have clear stakes and tension. Same with the way that Major ultimately defeats it.
Motor center compromised.
In of itself, Major forcing the power lid open does seem like a heroic moment. But the thing is, we have no reference as to how difficult that is. We don't know how unbreakable the lid is. We don't know how strong Major is compared to it, which means that the whole moment just feels empty. And it would have been so much more effective if the movie had just clearly set up the assumption that the lid cannot be opened. Again, let's say that in that same earlier scene, a bunch of bad guys use explosives and whatever ways to try and get the lid open. But none of it works because, as would have been established, the lid is impossible to open. And now, with that knowledge, when the audience sees Major break her own body to force it open by hand, that's powerful, that's satisfying, that's memorable. If you want more examples, just watch the movie. Pretty much every payoff and build-up does have this problem. The glitch memories that Major sees of her real past, they don't work, because we haven't seen any visuals of her fake past that they would be in conflict with. The twist where the doctor doesn't really need Major's consent to modify her body, that doesn't work, because we've never seen anyone actually need her consent to be able to do so.
それでは同意を。
My name is Major, and I give my consent.
Even though I am all for women who look like Scarlett Johansson to give their consent, this doesn't make any sense. Why would Major's boss need her consent to kill someone she has no relation to? Come on, movie.
Simply put, almost none of the payoffs in this movie work because there's no proper setup to put them in context, which gives off the overall feeling that the movie is just trying to reap the rewards without putting any work into it. And no, you can't just set up things at the same time as you pay them off. While the previous 2 points were more about why this movie isn't good, there's also a side to this topic that makes it downright bad. The fact that if you don't visually establish key information, your movie very easily becomes confusing to the audience, which in turn then takes the audience out of the experience, something which sadly is very much the case in Ghost in the Shell. Take for example, the garbage truck ambush.
At least if you can't play that proper, it sounds...
After the shootout, the sequence then leads to the shallow water fight, which quite honestly is pretty freaking aesthetically striking and cool. Or at least it would be, if not for the fact that at this point I'm completely bewildered by something else. Where the f did the garbage truck driver suddenly get automatic weapons? In one shot, they're in a truck being taken over by the bad guy, and then in the next shot they hop out with guns in their hands that just a second ago weren't in their hands. Like, where'd they come from? I understand that this gun thing is part of the mystery that the movie delves into later on, but the way it's presented isn't mysterious or intriguing, it's just confusing. And what baffles me the most is just how easy it would have been to avoid this problem. Instead of the guns just magically appearing, why didn't you just show the garbage men pull them out of the glove box or whatever? This way it would have been clear that the bad guy already set this moment up earlier. This way the question in the audience's mind wouldn't be where did the weapons come from, but instead why do the drivers have weapons in their car, which directly supports the mystery that the movie is trying to create. It might seem like a minor thing, but I guarantee you it would have made a huge difference, because it's always much easier to accept information when you see it. Then again, maybe this isn't such a big deal. Maybe I'm just exaggerating. Maybe. That's a valid argument. Or it would be if this was just a one-off thing. And it's not. Like, fighting a tiny toddler isn't a big deal. But fighting 1,000 tiny toddlers, I can tell you from experience, that is a pretty big deal. And in a similar manner, a big chunk of this movie is based on smaller narrative information that is never visually delivered to the audience.
Are you okay?
I know where he is.
What do you mean you know where he is? Based on what?
This cube is secure. It can't be, Major.
Lie detector. He must have hacked in that way. We should uplift.
What lie detector? I didn't see any lie detector.
What are you doing to me?
I have connected you to a network of my own creation. Come with me. into my network.
What network? What does that mean? Is it like a physical thing like they show in the Matrix? Is it this guy's own Discord server? Like, what is? Bigger things, smaller things, the list of confusion goes on. Why does Major suddenly know for sure to switch sides just because the bad guy says so without any actual visual proof? Why is the bad guy killing scientists exactly? Is it just because he wants to? Is it because he needs to in order to create his Discord network or whatever? Don't ask me. If you want to make a movie with an ambiguous ending that leaves the audience thinking, fine. If you want to make a movie out of puzzle pieces that make sense only when fully assembled, fine, if it's a smaller indie thing. If you want to make a movie that consistently confuses the audience just because you don't visually introduce mandatory narrative elements, no.